Once upon a time, in the Rocky Mountains in the 1900s, there was a small town called Bankhead, where a log mill was located. The mill was owned by the Johnston family, who were very proud of their business and the quality of the logs that were produced there. One day, Oscar, Amelia, and Marcus decided to go on an adventure in the woods surrounding the mill. They had never been to the mill before and were curious about how it worked. They left town early one morning, as they knew that it would be a long journey to the log mill. As they were wandering, they stumbled across a small stream that flowed through the forest. As they followed the stream, they were startled when they saw something moving in the trees. "It's a family of deer," exclaimed Amelia. Indeed, there was a family, a buck, a doe, and their fawn, who was resting lazily in the summer heat. "We must be very quiet so we don't startle them," said Marcus. They slowly and quietly walked a safe distance from the deer so they wouldn't disturb them. As the children walked further, they began stumbling across lots of old things scattered throughout the forest. "Look, an old bucket," said Oscar. "And over there, those are old tools," stated Marcus. "And look at those. Those are old rusty barrels," pointed Amelia. "I think there must have been an old house around here," said Marcus. "And look, old pipes. And I think over there is an old stove." "Hey, you guys, look over here. I think this used to be the house," explained Oscar. "It has all rotted and fallen apart." After exploring the property where the old house once stood, Oscar, Amelia, and Marcus continued on their way in search of the log mill. They knew they must be getting closer when they could hear the big saws cutting through the trees. When they finally arrived at the mill, the children were fascinated by the large saw blades and the way the logs were cut into planks. They watched as the workers carefully guided the logs through the saw, making sure to avoid any dangerous splinters. One of the workers noticed the group of children and motioned for them to come closer. He introduced himself as Andy and offered to show the children around the mill. Andy was a kind and patient man, and he explained the entire process of how the logs were cut and shaped into planks. The children were amazed by what they saw and listened intently as Andy spoke. They asked questions, and Andy was happy to answer them all. He told them about the importance of the log mill to the town and how it provided jobs for many families. "I have worked here for many years," said Andy, "and I know how to use all of these different tools in the lumber mill. Sometimes I work as the safety trainer, showing all of the new mill workers how to work in the mill safely and so they don't get hurt." "You must get very dusty," said Amelia. "Well, Amelia, I suppose that is true," said Andy in agreement. "Maybe one day I will come work at the lumber mill," said Oscar. "Why don't you come and see me when you are all grown up, and I will see to it personally about getting you a job at the mill. Maybe you can be the operator of the log deck. That is a very important job," said Andy. "Me too," said Marcus. "It takes two people to work on the log deck. Oscar and I can be partners." "That sounds like a fine idea," said Andy. Oscar and Marcus would make a great team. Just then, they heard a loud rumble, followed by the sounds of bells. "That's the train," said Marcus. "You're right," said Andy. "Let's go watch the train arrive at the mill with its cars full of logs to be cut at the mill." The children walked with Andy to the edge of the platform and watched as the train pulled into the log mill. As the sun began to set, the children thanked Andy for the tour and knew that it was getting late, so they needed to head back to town. It was such a long walk getting here. I'm too tired to have to walk all the way back into town, and it's getting dark soon too, said Amelia worriedly. Don't worry, Amelia, said Andy. You're just in time for the passenger train that stops at the lumber mill to take the workers home at the end of their long workday. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think I can hear the train whistle off in the distance. It must be getting close. Sure enough, Andy was right. The children stood and waited for the train to come to a stop. They saw their longtime friend Stanley, the train conductor. Stanley saw them too. "Hello, children. Out for another adventure?" he asked. "We sure have been," said Marcus. "Andy showed us around the lumber mill and told us all about how trees are cut into lumber for building all sorts of things." "That sounds great," said Stanley. "Now let's get you kids home before your parents start to worry." While riding the train back home, they couldn't stop talking about all the things they had learned and how much fun they had. From that day on, they visited the log mill whenever they could and became friends with Andy and the other mill workers. The log mill in the little town of Bankhead in the Rocky Mountains became a special place for the children, a place of wonder and friendship. They learned about hard work, the value of helping one another, and the importance of contributing to their community. It can also be a long journey for a tree to get to the log mill from the forest. All of the trees that were cut need to be moved and stacked in the forest into a neat pile. Most times a road needs to be built for the logs to travel on. The logs can travel in many ways. They can be pulled by horses. A tractor or bulldozer may do the job instead. They can travel by train. Sometimes the heavy lifting of the logs is done by a river, and the logs float their way downstream until they reach the log mill. But much of the time, especially today, logs are stacked on trucks to be taken to the log mill. However they may get there, the next part of the journey begins once they arrive at the mill. Up the logs go on the log slide and into the mill. Then the mill saws cut the bark off the trees and into all different sizes. Isn't it great that the loggers and mill workers do all of this for us? It would be a lot of work if we had to go to the forest ourselves to get all of the wood that we needed. It makes things so much easier when the wood we need is delivered almost right to our front door.